Everyone thought I was falling apart, but I was quietly rebuilding my life. Have you ever had the feeling that everyone around you believes your life is falling apart? Not just struggling a little, not just having a bad week. I mean, truly falling apart. The kind of moment where people start whispering about you when you're not around. The kind of moment where even the people who once believed in you start looking at you with quiet disappointment. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you're there right now, where everything on the outside looks like failure, like chaos, like you've lost your direction. But what nobody understands is that sometimes what looks like destruction from the outside is actually reconstruction happening on the inside. And that is exactly what happened to me. For a long time, people thought I was losing everything. They thought I was falling apart, but what they didn't see was that I was quietly rebuilding my life piece by piece. Let me tell you how it happened. A few years ago, my life looked successful from the outside. I had a stable job, a routine that made sense. People around me who believed I was doing well. My days were predictable, organized, structured. If someone asked how I was doing, I had the perfect answer ready. I'm good. I'm busy. Everything is fine. And most people believed it, but inside things were very different. Every morning, I woke up feeling heavier than the day before, not physically. Mentally, it felt like. I was slowly drifting away from the life I was supposed to live. The job that once felt exciting became exhausting. The conversations that once felt meaningful became shallow. The goals that once motivated me suddenly felt empty. And the worst part was that I didn't know how to explain it to anyone, because from the outside, nothing was technically wrong. There was no dramatic collapse, no sudden disaster. Just a quiet feeling growing inside me that something in my life wasn't aligned anymore, and that feeling grew stronger every single day. Eventually, I reached a point where pretending everything was fine became harder than admitting it wasn't. So I started making changes, small ones at first, but those small changes began to scare people. I stopped saying yes to everything. I stopped showing up to events that drained me. I stopped chasing things that no longer felt meaningful. And that's when the whispers started. People began to notice that something about me had changed. You've been quiet lately. Are you okay? Why are you pulling away from everything? Some people asked with concern, others asked with curiosity, and some didn't ask at all. They just assumed the worst. Then came the biggest change. I made a decision that shocked almost everyone around me. I walked away from the life everyone thought I should keep. The job, the routine, the version of myself I had spent years building. And when that happened, people started drawing their own conclusions. They thought I had lost direction. They thought I was making a mistake. Some thought I was having some kind of personal breakdown. I could see it in their eyes. The confusion, the judgment, the silent question they were too polite to ask. What are you doing with your life? And honestly, I didn't always have the perfect answer. Because rebuilding your life rarely starts with clarity. It usually starts with uncertainty. And that's the part most people don't understand. They think transformation looks confident. They imagine someone standing up one day with a clear vision and a perfect plan. But real change doesn't look like that. Real change looks messy. It looks slow. It looks uncertain from the outside. It can look like failure. And that's exactly how my life looked for a while. Spent months in what felt like silence. Less social events. Fewer conversations. More time alone. More time thinking. More time questioning everything. I thought I knew about myself. And during that period, people started telling stories about what they believed was happening to me. Some said I had burned out. Others said I couldn't handle pressure. A few believed I had simply given up. What they didn't know was that every quiet moment was part of rebuilding something stronger. Because when you stop performing for everyone else, something interesting happens. You finally start listening to yourself. For the first time in years, I began asking questions I had ignored for too long. What actually makes me feel alive? What kind of life do I really want? What expectations have I been carrying that don't belong to me? And those questions changed everything. At first, the answers were uncomfortable. Some of the paths I had been following weren't really mine. Some of the goals I had been chasing were borrowed from other people. Some of the pressure I felt came from expectations I never chose. realizing that was both terrifying and freeing at the same time. Because once you see it, you can't pretend you don't dot. So I started rebuilding dot, not loudly dot, not publicly dot, quietly dot, while everyone else believed I was falling apart. I was learning new things dot, reading more than I ever had before, studying ideas that challenged how I saw the world. I was rebuilding my mindset. Then I started rebuilding my habits. Waking up earlier dot, taking care of my body, spending less time consuming noise and more time creating direction. None of it looked impressive from the outside dot. There were no big announcements, no dramatic success stories dot, just quiet daily effort. And that effort slowly started changing me dot, month by month. Things began shifting. I became calmer dot, more focused, more intentional with my time. And the funny thing is that while my life was getting stronger internally, many people still believed I was struggling. Because external transformation always lags behind internal transformation dot, people judge what they can see dot. They see the job you left, the routine you broke, the social circle you stepped away from. They don't see the mental work happening behind the scenes, the discipline dot, the reflection, the uncomfortable growth dot. And for a long time I let them believe their version of the story. I stopped trying to explain everything because I realized something important dot. Not everyone is meant to understand your rebuilding phase. Some people only understand results dot, and that's okay. The rebuilding period is not about convincing others dot. It's about becoming someone stronger than the version of you that existed before. There were days during that time when I doubted myself, days when the silence felt heavy dot, days when the path forward wasn't clear. But every time I felt like giving up, I reminded myself why I started. Because living a life that looks good from the outside but feels empty on the inside is a slow kind of suffering. And I was done with that dot. Slowly the results began appearing dot. New opportunities showed up, not because I chased them desperately, but because I had become a different person dot. My thinking had changed dot. My energy had changed. The way I approached problems had changed. And when those changes became visible, something interesting happened. The same people who once thought I was falling apart started saying something different. They said things like, "You seem different. You look more confident. It feels like you figured things out." But the truth is, I hadn't magically figured everything out. I had simply rebuilt my foundation dot. And once the foundation is strong, the rest of life becomes easier to build dot. Today, when I look back at that period of my life, I feel grateful for it. Even for the misunderstandings, even for the people who doubted me, because that phase taught me something powerful dot. Sometimes the most important growth in your life happens quietly, without applause, without validation, without anyone noticing dot. It's the kind of growth that only you understand while it's happening. And if you're going through something similar right now, I want you to remember this. Just because people think you're falling apart doesn't mean you actually are. Sometimes you're just in the middle of rebuilding something better dot. Sometimes stepping back from the life everyone expects is the first step toward creating the life you actually want. Sometimes silence is not weakness dot. It's preparation. And sometimes the people who appear lost are actually the ones brave enough to start over dot. So if the world around you feels confused about your choices right now, don't panic dot. You don't need everyone's approval to rebuild your life. You don't need everyone to understand your process. All you need is the courage to keep going, quietly until the results speak for themselves. Because one day people will look at your life and think it all came together suddenly. They'll assume you got lucky. They'll think success appeared overnight. But you will know the truth. You will remember the quiet mornings, the lonely decisions, the slow progress nobody applauded, the rebuilding phase that almost no one understood. And that will be the part of your story that matters the most. Because the strongest lives are not built in the spotlight. They are built quietly dot, brick by brick dot, choice by choice dot, day by day dot. So if it feels like your world is falling apart right now, take a deep breath. Maybe it's not falling apart. Maybe you're just finally rebuilding it the right way. There was a moment during that time that I remember very clearly. It wasn't a big dramatic moment. No music playing. No life-changing speech. No sudden miracle. It was a Tuesday morning. Cold, quiet, ordinary. I was sitting in a small coffee shop near my apartment. The kind of place where nobody really talks to each other. Just people with laptops, headphones, and tired faces trying to get through the day. I had been going there a lot during those months, not because I loved coffee, but because I needed space to think. And on that particular morning, I realized something that changed the way I looked at everything. I realized I had spent most of my life performing success, performing confidence, performing happiness. Not necessarily lying, but constantly adjusting myself to fit what people expected me to be at work. I played the role of the reliable professional with friends. I played the role of the easygoing one. With family, I played the role of the person who had everything under control. But somewhere along the way, I stopped asking a very important question. Who am I when I'm not performing for anyone? That question stayed in my mind for days, and it forced me to look at my life in a way I never had before. I started noticing how many decisions I had made simply to avoid disappointing people. The career path, the lifestyle, even some friendships, they weren't bad choices, but they weren't completely mine either. And realizing that was uncomfortable, because when you remove expectations from your life, you are suddenly faced with a blank space. And blank spaces are terrifying. Most people rush to fill them with something new as quickly as possible. A new job, a new relationship, a new identity. But I decided to do something different. I decided to sit in that empty space for a while, just observe. Just listen, just understand myself without pressure. And then during that quiet period, I discovered something interesting. For the first time in years, my mind felt calm, not happy all the time. Not perfectly confident, but calm. Like I wasn't constantly chasing approval anymore. And that calmness became the foundation for everything that happened next. Instead of trying to rebuild my entire life overnight, I focused on rebuilding small things. The way I started my mornings, the way I used my time, the way I talked to myself internally. I began waking up earlier, not because some productivity video told me to, but because those early hours felt peaceful. While the world was still quiet, I would sit by the window with a notebook, sometimes writing thoughts, sometimes writing questions, sometimes writing nothing at all. Just thinking. At first it felt strange. Slow. Almost unproductive. But slowly those mornings became my favorite part of the day, because during those moments, I wasn't reacting to the world. I was shaping my direction before the noise began. Around that same time, I started paying attention to something else. The voices inside my head. You know the ones, the quiet comments that appear when you're about to try something new. The voice that says, what if you fail? What will people think? What if you're not good enough? For years, I had accepted those voices as truth. But during that rebuilding phase, I started questioning them. And the more I questioned them, the more I realized something surprising. Most of those fears weren't actually mine. They were echoes of things people had said to me in the past. Teachers, coworkers, family members, even strangers. Little comments that had planted seeds of doubt in my mind, seeds that had quietly grown over time. And once I noticed that, I started pulling those seeds out one by one. Not aggressively, not dramatically. Just by replacing them with something more honest. Instead of saying, I'm not ready, I started saying, I'm learning. Instead of saying, I might fail, I started saying, I might grow. Those small shifts in thinking changed the way I approached life. And that new mindset slowly opened doors I didn't expect. One afternoon, while working on something personal at the same coffee shop, a man sitting nearby started a conversation with me. It was casual at first. Just a comment about the book I was reading. But that conversation lasted almost an hour. And during that hour, something interesting happened. He asked me questions about what I was working on. Questions that forced me to explain ideas I had only been thinking about privately. Ideas about life, about purpose. About personal change. At the end of the conversation, he said something I will never forget. He said, you should share these ideas with more people. I laughed a little, because the idea felt ridiculous at the time. Who would want to hear my thoughts? I was just someone who had recently walked away from a stable life. Someone most people believed was struggling, but that comment stayed with me. For days, for weeks, and eventually, I decided to experiment just a little. I started writing online, not professionally, not with a strategy, just sharing thoughts about the lessons. I was learning during that rebuilding phase the importance of slowing down, the pressure of living according to other people's expectations. The quiet courage required to start over, at first. Almost nobody read those posts. A few friends, maybe a stranger here and there, but something interesting started happening. The people who did read them began sending messages, real messages, honest ones, messages, saying things like, I feel like this too. I thought I was the only one going through this. Your words made me rethink my life. And those messages shocked me because I realized something powerful, the struggles I thought made me look like. I was falling apart were actually connecting me to people. The honesty I had been afraid to show was exactly what others needed to hear, and that realization gave me a new kind of motivation. Not the kind based on proving people wrong, but the kind based on helping someone else feel. Less alone, so I kept writing, kept reflecting, kept sharing, quietly, while most people around me still believed my life was in a strange, uncertain phase. But something was changing, slowly, silently, and even though the outside world hadn't fully noticed yet, my life was no longer falling apart. It was evolving into something stronger than before, and what happened next was something I never expected. Because the quiet rebuilding phase eventually leads to something powerful, visibility, not the kind you chase, the kind that naturally appears when your growth becomes impossible to hide. But that part of the story came later. And when it did, it surprised everyone, including me. For a long time, nothing looked different from the outside. If someone had looked at my life during that period, they probably would have said the same thing they had been saying for months. He's still figuring things out. He's still trying to rebuild. He's still lost, and honestly, I didn't blame them, because real rebuilding rarely looks impressive at first. There are no headlines. No big announcements. No applause. Just small decisions made quietly, day after day. And for almost a year, that is my reality. Every morning I wrote. Every afternoon I worked small jobs to support myself. Every evening I read, studied, and tried to understand life from a deeper perspective than I ever had before. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And slowly, the pieces of my life began aligning in ways I never expected. One of the first signs that things were shifting came from a message, a simple message. Someone I didn't know had read one of the things I wrote online. They sent me a long paragraph explaining how they had been struggling with burnout, anxiety, and the pressure of constantly trying to meet other people's expectations. They said something that stopped me in my tracks. I thought I was the only one pretending to have everything together. I remember staring at that message for a long time, because that sentence described exactly how I have felt for years, and it made me realize something important. Most people are not struggling because they are weak. Most people are struggling because they are exhausted from pretending to be stronger than they feel, pretending to be happier than they are, pretending to be more certain about life than they really are. And that shared struggle became the center of everything I started writing about. Not success, not motivation, but honesty, real life, the uncomfortable middle part of growth that nobody talks about. More messages started arriving, not thousands, not viral. Just steady, consistent, people sharing their stories. People opening up, people saying they finally felt understood, and something inside me began to change. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't chasing approval. I wasn't performing. I was simply sharing the truth of what I had lived, and somehow that truth was reaching people. But the real turning point happened. About 18 months after I had first stepped away from my old life, I received an email from someone I had never met. The subject line was simple: "Your words helped my son." I opened the message expecting something brief, but what I found instead was a long letter from a father. He explained that his son had been going through a very difficult time, dropped out of college, lost confidence in himself, believed he had already ruined his future. The father said he had tried everything to help him. Advice, encouragement, tough. Love. Nothing seemed to work until one night his son found one of my posts. The father wrote that his son stayed up reading several of my writings. And the next morning he came downstairs and said something that surprised the entire family. He said, "Maybe I'm not falling apart. Maybe I'm just rebuilding." When I read that line, I had to close my laptop for a moment because that sentence had come from something I wrote months earlier. A thought I had shared during one of my lowest points, and now it had traveled across the country and landed in the mind of someone who needed it. That moment changed everything for me. It made the entire journey suddenly make sense. All the confusion, all the doubt, all the days where I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. Walking away from my old life. Because in that moment, I realized something powerful. Growth is rarely about proving people wrong. It's about becoming someone who can help others stand up again. That email gave me a kind of clarity I had never felt before. For years, I had been chasing success in ways that looked impressive from the outside. Career titles, recognition, status. But none of those things had ever made me feel the way that single message did. And from that point forward, I stopped thinking about rebuilding my old life. Instead, I focused on building something entirely new, something meaningful. I began dedicating more time to writing, more time to understanding the struggles people were facing. I read psychology books, biographies, philosophy, anything that helped me understand human resilience. And the more I learned, the more I realized something surprising. The moments when people believe their lives are falling apart are often the exact moments when the real life is beginning. But society doesn't teach us how to navigate those moments. We're taught how to succeed, how to achieve, how to compete. But we're rarely taught how to rebuild. And because of that, many people believe they are broken when they are actually transforming. That realization became the heart of everything I shared. And slowly, something unexpected started happening. More people began paying attention, not in a flashy internet, same kind of way, but in a deeper way. People began sharing my words with friends, families, coworkers, some. Teachers started using my writings in classrooms. A therapist once wrote to me saying she had recommended one of my essays to a client who was struggling with identity after losing a job. And each of those small moments built something bigger. Trust. A quiet community of people who understood that life doesn't move in straight lines, that progress often looks messy, that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who have had to start over. Meanwhile, the people who once believed I was falling apart slowly began noticing something different. They noticed the calmness in my voice, the clarity in my decisions, the way I no longer rushed to explain or defend my path, because the truth was, I wasn't rebuilding quietly anymore. I had already rebuilt. I was now building forward. And the most surprising moment came during a family gathering. About 2 years after everything began, one of my relatives pulled me aside. Someone who had once looked at me with concern. Someone who had once asked if I was sure I knew what I was doing with my life. They said something that made me pause. "I think we misunderstood what you were going through." There was no judgment in their voice, just honesty. And in that moment, I realized something important. People weren't wrong about me before. From their perspective, it really did look like my life was falling apart. What they couldn't see was the rebuilding happening inside. And that realization filled me with a strange sense of peace. Because it meant something very simple. I no longer needed anyone to understand my journey for it to be valid. The rebuilding had already happened. The foundation was already stronger than before, and the most powerful part of the story was still ahead. Because once your life is rebuilt from the inside, the outside world eventually catches up. And when it does, the opportunities that appear can change everything. But what happened next was something I never planned. And it all started with a phone call that arrived on an ordinary afternoon. A phone call that would connect my quiet journey to something much bigger than I ever imagined. And that moment is where the final part of this story begins. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Nothing about that day Felt special. I was sitting at my desk in my small apartment. The same place where I had spent hundreds of quiet nights writing, thinking, and slowly rebuilding my life piece by piece. Outside. The street sounded normal. Cars passing. People talking. Somewhere in the distance. A dog barking. Just another ordinary day. My phone buzzed on the table. I almost ignored it. Not because I was busy, but because I had trained myself to live without expecting anything important to arrive. For a long time, life had been about showing up for the work, not waiting for rewards. But something made me pick it up. Unknown number. I answered. Hello? There was a brief pause on the other end. Then a voice responded. Hi, is this Daniel? Yes, my name is Rebecca. I hope I'm not interrupting you. I work with a publishing group in Chicago. For a moment, I didn't say anything. Publishing group? I wasn't a famous writer. I didn't have a best-selling book. Most of what I had written existed quietly online, read by people who shared it with others. Nothing about it felt like something a publishing company would notice. Rebecca continued. We've been following some of your work for the past year. That sentence alone felt surreal. Following my work? She explained that someone on their team had discovered one of my essays almost 8 months earlier. It had been shared across a small network of educators, therapists, and readers who focused on personal development and emotional resilience. At first, they thought I might already be an established author writing under a different name. But when they looked deeper, they realized something surprising. I was just someone telling honest story. Stories about rebuilding, stories about failure, stories about the uncomfortable middle parts of life that most people avoid talking about. Rebecca said something that stuck with me. Your writing doesn't sound like advice. It sounds like survival. That sentence hit me harder than she probably realized, because she was right. Everything I wrote came from lived experience, from nights when I questioned every decision, from mornings when getting out of bed felt like progress, from the long quiet stretch where nobody outside my small apartment had any idea what I was rebuilding. Rebecca explained why she was calling. Their team believed the ideas I had been sharing deserved to reach more people, not in the form of short essays scattered across the internet, but in a book, a real book, one that could tell the full story. The silence on my side of the phone must have lasted a few seconds too. Long. She laughed softly. I know this probably sounds sudden. It did. Very sudden, but not impossible, because the strange thing about rebuilding your life slowly is that when opportunities finally appear, they often arrive quietly. No fireworks. No dramatic music. Just a conversation, a door opening, a chance to step forward. Rebecca told me to take time to think about. There was no pressure. They simply wanted to explore the idea. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, looking at the same desk that had witnessed every stage of my rebuilding. The late nights, the frustration. The moments where I almost quit writing because I thought nobody was listening. And now someone had listened. Not just someone. An entire team of people who believed the story mattered. But the most interesting part of what happened next wasn't the book opportunity. It was the moment I told my parents. I drove to their house that weekend. The same house where years earlier we had sat around the kitchen table, discussing my decision to step away from the life everyone expected me to live. Back then, the conversation had been filled with concern. Uncertainty. Quiet fear about whether I was making a mistake. But this time the conversation felt different. We were sitting in the living room. My mother asked how work was going. I told them about the phone call. At first they looked confused, then surprised. Then proud in a way that was quiet but unmistakable. My father leaned back in his chair and smiled. I guess you really were rebuilding. That sentence meant more to me than the publishing opportunity itself, because it showed something important. People eventually understand the journey, even if they didn't see it clearly at the beginning. Word about the book project slowly spread among friends and family. The reactions were interesting. Some people were shocked. Others said something I had heard many times before. I always knew you would figure things out. And I would smile when they said that, not because I believed they had always known, but because I understood something now that I didn't understand before. People often rewrite the past once the outcome becomes clear. When someone is struggling, the world sees uncertainty. But when that same person rises again, the story suddenly feels inevitable. That's just human nature. And honestly, I didn't mind anymore, because the real victory wasn't proving anyone wrong. The real victory was becoming someone. I respected someone who didn't need approval to move forward. Months passed as I worked on the book. It forced me to revisit every stage of the journey. The career I walked away from, the uncertainty, the isolation, the rebuilding. But something interesting happened during the writing process. I stopped seeing those years as a period where my life had fallen apart. Instead, I started seeing them as the most important years of my life. The years where I learned patience, humility, resilience. The years where I stopped performing and started living honestly, And when the book was finally finished, something even more surprising happened. The story resonated with people far beyond what I expected. Not because it was dramatic, not because it was extraordinary, but because it was familiar, so many people recognized themselves in the quiet. Rebuilding, the feeling of starting over, the fear that everyone else thought they were failing, and the slow realization that growth is often invisible to the outside world. One evening, about 3 years after the day I first walked away from the life that wasn't working, I was invited to speak at a small event. Nothing huge, just a gathering of people interested in personal growth. But standing there in front of that audience, I noticed something that made me pause. Many of them looked exactly like I had looked years earlier, tired, uncertain, quietly questioning their direction in life. And I began the talk with the most honest sentence I could think of. There was a time when everyone thought my life was falling apart. The room grew quiet. I continued, and the truth is, they weren't completely wrong. A few people smiled because they understood I really was falling apart. But what nobody could see was that I was also rebuilding. That line landed differently. You could feel it. Because almost everyone in that room had experienced a moment where their life looked broken from the outside. But inside, something stronger was forming. And that realization is the heart of this entire story. Life rarely moves in straight lines. Sometimes things collapse, plans fail, careers end, relationships change. And during those moments, it can feel like everything is falling apart. But sometimes that collapse is actually the beginning of something far stronger. Rebuilding your life is not allowed. Process. It's quiet. Slow. Invisible to most people. And that's okay. Because the people who matter most will eventually see the result. But even if they don't, the most important thing is that you see it, that you know the truth of your own journey. Looking back now, I'm grateful for the years when everyone thought I was falling apart, because those are the years I finally learned how to build a life. That was truly mine. Not impressive. Not perfect, but honest. And strong enough to last. And if you're in a season where it feels like your life is unraveling, I want you to remember something. Just because the world thinks you're falling apart doesn't mean you're not quietly rebuilding something incredible.